want the contributors to start, and we start with Shri Shakti Sinha to speak on his chapter. And
thank you, Anirban. Having been involved for 3 years in writing on different aspects, it's always good to analyze events, not just list them. Listing is important, of course. Recently, the word nudge has come into our dictionary, thanks to the Nobel Prize for Economics, given to Mr. Thaler. The concept of nudge is very interesting. It's, of course, a new field of economics called behavioral economics, which goes into psychology. See, economics is premised on the principle that all human beings are rational human beings. Now, this is good for purpose of generalizations. It's an assumption you make to help us build our models. But if I assume that the presumption equals reality, 3 lines equals reality, then we are in for serious trouble. Splendid work done by gentleman economist at, I think it's Harvard, Sendil Mullainathan, showed that when you give people an option of investing money for 1 year or 366 days, the reactions are very different to both. The difference is 1 day. But the moment you say 366 days, thinking, oh, it's more than a year. In other words, there's a lot of non-rationality into our decision making. Now, for policymakers, this is problematic. What we have attempted to do, as Vivek Debra pointed out when we make the Pradhan Mantri Gram Sadak Yojana, is to lay down very rigid cookie-cutter approaches, knowing that I can never individually guide everybody, right? So I do what I can't tailor a product to 6 to 7 trillion people, so I have a very rough and ready thing which I push down and make assumptions based on that. But as the economics as a discipline has questioned itself for the last 10 years, since 2008, it has realized that there are tremendous limitations in this approach. Nudge, on the other hand, is based on the principle is, knowing that people do make irrational choices, we nudge them towards the right way. In other words, if I tell you that you will have to pay extra for your medical insurance, which actually is very essential for your life, because tomorrow you can have a catastrophic emergency and you don't have the money for it. If I give you an option, do you want to be a member, yes or no? Because it implies paying out X amount of rupees every month. A lot of people will pay no. But if I make you a member with the option to opt out, end result is exactly the same. You have the option to opt out. Far less people will opt out than will remain in it. So you nudge a person towards a certain direction. Why do I start with nudge in this book called? And I'll again add a small anecdote. I recently met a minister from a European country, understanding India, and we discussed economics and is Modi a reformer, is Modi a Margaret Thatcher? The point is yes and no. If you expected Narendra Modi to be a Margaret Thatcher in terms of privatization, in terms of withdrawal of the state, in terms of other fundamental approaches that Margaret Thatcher made, no. But if you look at Modi in terms of transformation, which again Vivek had mentioned a lot, then yes. Now when the Give It Up campaign for LPG was started, and even now I still get on WhatsApp a lot of messages saying, why are MPs getting 10,000 rupees a month for telephone charges, when at 599 you can have unlimited data. Tell them to first sort it out before asking us, the middle class, to give up a subsidy. Of course, us, the middle class, is the wrong word, but we think we are all middle class. So when the Give It Up was, okay, we realized that the LPG policy is financially and environmentally unsustainable. One approach is to cut off subsidy completely, which is highly disruptive and for people at the margin very difficult. Other is to nudge people in the right direction, saying that lots of people without cooking gas, and I'll just come to that. But if you give it up we'll be able to give LPG to a more deserving person. Now, this is in a country where the per capita income is still very low. Whatever we think of ourselves, we're still a very poor country. A lot of people said this is a remedy for disaster. And it wasn't a lots and lots. Till I counted many months ago, 12 million consumers, so if you're a family of 5, it's about 70, 80 million people, had given up their LPG subsidy. Why is this so important? It's important because, again, as Vivek mentioned, the difference between government and governance. Government does things to you. In governance, you are a participant. And therefore, by voluntarily giving up my LPG subsidy, I am becoming a part of the governance effort, the development effort. I, as a student, have agency, so I am deciding for myself. So rather than the citizen becoming a subject of government, the citizens is empowered enough, and agency is a serious problem in political science. You're exercising your agency by saying, yes, I agree that I may not be well off. However, I still feel there are people much less well off than me, and by doing this little thing, I'm contributing to a process. This was seen again in a different context in demonetization, when everybody said that Indians, we don't even today we can't stand in the line. If you go to any window where tickets are being sold or an OPD card is to be made, we form an inverse triangle. Base is at the window and the triangle head is at the back. And yet people stood for hours and hours in line at great real and opportunity cost to themselves. Again, it comes from the same feeling of empowerment and agency. Yes, sacrifices are required to make this country. There are serious structural issues. Structural issues cannot be solved overnight, so fiats cannot be done so. This requires fundamental changes in the way we operate, behavioral changes, that paying tax is a normal thing. Paying tax is not an exception. And therefore, people were able again to contribute in demonetization by being very quiet, silent, and more effectively, as we saw, why did the pollsters get UP all wrong? Because they saw only people in trouble standing in line. They did not see people in line mentally voting for a particular course of action. Whether the course of action is right or wrong, I will not go into it. I have very strong views on how the economy is restructured, but I'll leave that aside for a moment. So in both these cases, we have seen that people, analysts get it wrong precisely because we deny agency to people. We assume people have no agency. We do. On the other hand, we see the defects in the system and say everything is all wrong. It's all, we are a very corrupt people. Well, some of the countries who are very today considered clean countries were earlier very corrupt countries. But they have gone through institutional change and behavioral change, which has led to this. But this doesn't only come from nudging, it also comes from delivering. And I'll very quickly touch upon, I know Sarkar will also be talking about it, so I will not take time on it. Kirk Smith will be talking on it. Is that the giving of gas to women in villages. Now we in Delhi keep cribbing. We feel happy that we are on the top in the world as a polluted city. India is somewhere at the top. But we keep cribbing about outdoor air pollution, which is a serious issue. The second largest cause of death in this country is indoor air pollution. Outdoor air pollution is only the fifth or the sixth largest cause of deaths. Indoor air pollution is far, far worse than anything that we have encountered. We are looking at 40% of all neonatal stillbirths are caused basically as an after effect of indoor pollution. The mother and the womb getting affected by it. If you look at low birth weight, if you look at other indicators, giving a gas to a woman in the house in a country which is still the largest users of biomass for fuel purposes. With that, one, your straightaway health indicators will change. IMR will improve. Stunting and other things which are terrible things happening to us will improve. It frees up the girl from spending 3 to 4 hours a day collecting biomass. It's tremendously empowering. So on one hand, it is for the health, quality of life so good. Other hand is also empowering because it allows the girl child to actually study. And if you add that with the Bijli thing, one of course is making sure that every village has electricity, important enough as it is. More important, the next step, it's a build-up, it's not that one or the other, you need both, is that every household gets electricity. Because giving electricity to the poor is really empowerment. One, it enlarges the working day tremendously. It allows again for education, because the false dichotomy of a poor country distinguishing between work and studies has to go away. It's very easy to condemn, but a family owning a small plot of land needs every person to be working on the field. See, if I'm hiring a labor and the marginal utility falls below 1, which means if the productivity of the person working is less than the wage I pay out to, I don't hire that person. But the family member working on it, I do not care about marginal utility. Let it fall. I only care about that extra production that I get from my field. So I have moved from productivity to production. This false dichotomy at a poor stage of low level of income cannot exist. Electricity in the house demolishes it. It allows the child to be active economically in her and his own way, and also to get studies. And yes, it enables you to break out of the technological trap. The repetitive, manually repetitive, mentally degrading work can be replaced by simple machines, which again increases productivity and income. If I look at all of this working together, if I look at, as I said, using nudge, using actual delivery, building credibility to bring about economic and social transformation. And that is what, therefore, in the chapter that I have written, the title I gave it was Audacious, Innovative Implementation. Because clearly the old approaches had its merits, had really tremendous amounts of limitations, that this is all very much required. But as I said, implementation is required. So the electricity you generate has to go up. The AITC losses, aggregate technical losses, has to come down. The DISCOMs have to become financially viable. Because if even today in large parts of the country where there's no electricity, though the lines are there, limited hours, if you ask the DISCOMs, they say every unit I supply, I lose money. The only way I can sustain myself is not to supply electricity. I mean, if this is the kind of distorted situation we have created over the years, obviously different changes are required. These changes do not come overnight, just cannot come overnight. But you have to keep on pushing it, making the changes, getting into innovative solutions. Now the way we have gone into non-conventional energy sources, and now even with, if I remove the subsidy from the solar, the gaps have disappeared. Earlier solar power was 3 times the cost of thermal power. With subsidies we had closed the gap. Now actually the new biddings which are going on, probably you can say safely that solar power is today actually at par. Now solar power does have issues of timing, therefore of storage. So we hope Mr. Tesla does a good job in the meantime. But petroleum shall remain with us for a long time to come, and therefore Aramco announces that it's setting up its major units in India. We have overtaken Japan, and obviously whether we like it or not, we will be using, and therefore whether you have the Pradhan Mantri Urja Ganga, which will link up massive gas linkages, which will provide for industrialization, it will provide for using of cars, lakhs and lakhs of motor vehicles, fertilizer plants, etc. Lots of cleanup is operating. We are setting up this very large petroleum tanks rather, at Visakhapatnam, Mangalore, Padur, etc., to build up our storage facilities in the event of a problem. And therefore, I will, as I said, not go into the chapter really, except again in closing to say that there are problems at different parts of the system. If there is a problem at the distribution end of the DISCOMs, it's also because there are long-term fixed PPAs working. And you cannot touch one without touching the other. And therefore, simple solutions in energy sector, like in any complicated sector, do not work. As I said, utilities, either do not supply electricity, or do not honor the PPA and buy electricity on the exchange, where sometimes the exchange prices falls to less than a rupee a unit. Why should I pay 4.5 rupees to buy on my PPA? I'll rather buy it on the exchange at 1 rupees. Now, as I said, these are problems of distribution problems. There are problems of areas. Some regions are over capacity, others is lower capacity. But at the end of the day, can we ensure that energy in any form, whether it's gas, whether it's petroleum, whether it's solar, whether it's thermal will stay with us, is able at the micro level. So your macro corrections are meant for only one purpose, that at the micro level, at the household level, at the factory level, whether it's an SME manufacturing unit or the biggest of factories, they cannot afford electrical interruptions. They want also quality power within the megahertz side. If they go up too much, the machines will burn. If they go too much, machines will trip. So there are problems. So these are all massive structural changes which are happening in the energy sector. Some, as the 7th schedule says, cannot be done by the central government. But now with the BJP in power in so many governments, the BJP can't even get away by saying state governments are not doing the job well. It is a job for the political parties, for the multi-level governance structure that we have created. But at the end of the day, it is a job for Indians to do it themselves. Thank you very much.